All right, and welcome everybody back to Super Mario Odyssey Task Season 3. I'm joined again by Smallland to look into task number 3, which took place in Sand Kingdom. What's up, Smallland?
Hi there.
So after some relatively quick tasks, especially task number 2, which was obviously in Dungeon Kingdom, the one before this, we do have a task here with lots of objectives. If we just line them up here, we have warp to a checkpoint, touch a checkpoint, get a gray moon, which is a previously collected moon, hit or destroy, in this case specifically, 3 cacti, and bounce on one of the flowers. And Sand Kingdom is huge and tremendously open, so I feel like technically there's a lot of places where you can piece together a route. But before we look into the best runs here, it's always nice to hear from you if you had anything specifically in mind when you were looking at this task.
When I went to create this task, I knew I wanted a warp to checkpoint right away, and I was in Sand Kingdom because we hadn't been there in a while. So I started with that, with the checkpoint, and I just looked around at all the checkpoints, seeing what was close. I did see there were a decent amount of flowers around, and of course there's cactuses everywhere in the kingdom, so I figured that would be a good choice. Then after that, I kind of tried to add stuff to make the task a little bit longer and to increase the potential routes. So after I had cactuses and flowers, there was a route that was still very fast in Oasis. It was like 3 seconds. And so I decided to add moons onto that, because then it might be a little bit longer. And then I looked in Oasis, and it would add like a second onto that route in Oasis. And it was clearly the fastest route. There was no way that wasn't going to be the fastest. So then I figured I could add one more thing, that being the other checkpoint. And that would make you actually move around in Sand Kingdom, which I figured it would... some people would be able to use the Jaxi to destroy the cactuses and bounce on the flowers maybe, and there's some other routes, like in this one in the ruins that we saw, where the people are just doing some really fancy movement to move around and hit these cactuses, or the cacti.
I love that insight on how you kind of like create the task for kind of assuring how it's not like one blatantly clearly fastest route that people just end up grinding. One fun fact about this task specifically, actually, it caused me to kind of roam around a little bit more in the post-P Sand Kingdom, and I ended up finding like a little darker side route improvement that saves like a second or a little bit more, just because I was like roaming around. It kind of like inspired me to check out more stuff, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, we obviously do have very fast boys here again, managing to get top 4 this time. And let's look at these runs. Let's see what they did a little bit better or differently to assure that they came in at the top.
Right, we have Zenrave here this week, which we haven't seen Zenrave in top 4 yet this season, but I think in last season they had a few pretty good placements later in the season, but we haven't seen them yet. So that's cool to see that new person in first place that we haven't seen in a while.
True, I remember him, I think from somewhere. It might have been the Ruin task. I definitely remember his task. I'm pretty sure it was the Ruin task where he got at least top 4 in, which was pretty movement intensive, by the way, in Season 2. But yeah, managing to get first place. I like starting from the bottom though, and this is Miles Pro this time. Previously was able to already get some early wins in the season. Not winning task 2, getting second, but winning task 1, and is back at number 4 this time. And he actually does a little route difference compared to the other 3 guys. So this is interesting. He picks up the moon at this ruins route, which seems very obvious because there's a gray moon next to you pretty much immediately when you warp. Seems very, very like daunting to pick that one up. But a little detail that these other 3 guys ended up abusing: if you actually break the cage that kind of covers the gray moon at the lower section, it will stay broken even after a warp. So the other 3 runners utilized that, kind of taken a little bit of a cleaner line towards the end objective, which will be the flower for all 4 of them, and cutting down the time a little bit. I actually haven't gotten insight really if Miles knew about this, because he's a very seasoned runner in pretty much a lot of categories, so he might have actually known that the cage would be open and just decided to go for this route anyways, because the movement is pretty like weird to figure out for this cage route.
And we can't actually see on his screen if the cage is broken or not here, so we don't really know.
Yep, we won't find out. But once again, I'm pretty sure he actually might have known. Miles runs a lot of different speed categories of Super Mario Odyssey, so probably just his preference here in this route. But let's start off by looking at his run. He cap dives over to the moon. You can actually get a cap dive out of a warp and spin pounds back to kind of fall down all the way. Doesn't actually ground pour anything. It was fastest to just keep falling.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first mechanic comes in here, which actually also makes this route at the ruin so strong. If you keep your camera on these cacti for a little bit, they will actually kind of go into this chain reaction where you hit one of them and then it will basically start this chain reaction where it will break 3 at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that's really a lot of people utilize in this task to save some time, is the chain reactions with the cacti, so they don't have to throw Cappy as much, which it did. Obviously, it saved time because all the top runners did end up using this mechanic. Something else that glossed over there is when everyone is falling, a few people I noticed did make the mistake of, in the air, while they were falling, they did a ground pound, and that actually slows you down because once you're falling in the air, you get to max fall speed pretty quickly, and if you don't ground pound immediately after falling off of a ledge, it's going to be slower because going into a ground pound brings you to max fall speed, but if you're already in max fall speed, then it's not actually saving you any time because then you're just wasting time on the ground pound animation. So that's something that we should probably point out here too, is...
Actually, I'm not sure if anybody in top 25 did it. I did a route initially that kind of looks like Miles' ones. When you get the spin pound under the moon, it's actually perfectly spaced for you in a way to end that roll on the ledge of the tower, and then you can actually spin pound down without losing any time to a ground pound animation. But that also ended up being slower because you couldn't get a clean line to those moons, so you ended up ground pounding on the higher ledge and having to roll boost, which is also slower than just normally falling. That would have been better than just a ground pound, but yep, normally falling ends up being the fastest movement for descending here.
Mm-hmm. I believe at least one person in the top 25 did that. I think it may have been Everett.
Okay, very cool. I really wanted to make this work. Ended up being a little bit slower than other attempts I got later on. But yeah, so other than that, Miles pretty much just long jumps over this gap, cap dive, rolls through the checkpoint, and then another mistake that people made here is actually rolling over the flower and then spin pounding back. That's also slower than just kind of like stopping your momentum and then rolling into the flower.
Yeah, I did see a few people as well. They ground pounded down into the flower, but then they had to just go down a second time to bounce off of it. And with here, you can see that everyone lands beside the flower and runs into it from the side, which gives you a bounce immediately and makes it so you don't have to fall twice.
Well, let's look at Lucidity's run next, because it's probably the biggest eye catcher as far as the looks of it goes. He
really flashy,
and also Circle both decided to route in a little down throw there, which, while looking very fast, ended up actually barely being fast, or maybe not even faster at all. Looks pretty much about the same speed if you compare to Zenrave, who didn't do one. That works because with the normal throw, you can kind of fall even past the cacti and then just throw Cappy back and keep moving. For the down throw, you basically get the cap throw done a little bit earlier, but you still gotta move towards the moon anyway, so it doesn't really save time in that specific case. Looks flashy though. Joy-Con only strat, obviously. But yeah, Lucidity does do 2 edge roll cancels. So you can actually roll cancel off of edges and kind of keep the fast momentum. Does this twice to go over to the moon, gets the roll cancel jump in, and hits the floor extremely fast. For him, I think the second roll cancel actually ended up losing him time, because he wasn't quite sure if he was going to make it over to the moon without a dive. But the dive he had to do there ended up losing his momentum. He got into the dive animation, and that was the point where Circle kind of ran away with it. Because he didn't do any of these, he just basically did a normal spin pound down throw towards the characters, and then just long jump. And we do see that sometimes these long jumps are just a little bit more optimal. It is known at this point that the initial long jump will slow you down, but if you make it work in the correct line and you just don't long jump for too long, it's still pretty fast.
Yeah, it's in this case, the reason why the long jump here does seem faster is because it is just a straighter line than doing that roll cancel off the ledge. You can see Lucidity turns almost 90 degrees, whereas Circle, he's just going straight all the way over to that moon.
Yeah. And then the only difference I was kind of briefly glancing over this between Circle and Zenrave here is, once again, Zenrave doesn't go for the downfall, but as they touch the moon, they're pretty much tight. The only time where he really speeds up is the very last section. They kind of spin pound at the gray moon there at the same time, but then he does his dives very, very quickly. As soon as he touches this upper ledge, the lead gets kind of visible. Also, his roll cancel jump there is kind of optimal because he doesn't really go left or right, just keeps straight, moves towards this flower, and hits this just around 0.1 earlier than circle, and kind of making the no Joy-Con straight work. I'm proud of this man. Big fan of the Pro Controller, and manages to make that win still.
Joy-Con Master Race.
Oh, I agree to disagree, Smallland, but I still care about comfy feelings when I game. Well, anyway, Zenrave just barely winning this. I'm very happy to see Circle again, and also take these people taking these runs really seriously. This might actually motivate me enough to also put more time in. Very skilled gamers right here, and definitely motivates me to also compete a little more serious in these tasks. This one was extremely fun for me. Once again, actually, since I love Sand Kingdom so much, especially in this state, got super sidetracked looking at like darker side routes, but this was so far definitely my favorite task. Very well designed. Was also pretty interesting to hear your insight in this, because initially when I looked at this task, I was like, yeah, I mean, let's just go to Aces and get a 3-second time, and then I realized you gotta touch another checkpoint, and this route was suddenly invalid, basically. But that being said, I had a lot of fun here in Sand Kingdom, but this has only been task 3, so we aren't even past the half time here in season 3, and task 4 is gonna be up next, but where will it be?